Runway has released Gen-4, a new AI video model, giving creators unprecedented control over characters, scenes, and motion. In this video, I'm going to show you the power of Runway's new Gen-4 model by comparing it to the previous version, Gen-3. I'll be using the exact same images and prompts for both models, and together, we'll see how much has improved. Check out my course on Gumroad. You'll learn how to use Runway step by step. You'll also get access to an 80-plus page PDF filled with prompts and different visual styles. It's the result of hundreds of hours of testing. Before we start, subscribe and don't forget to activate the notification button. And now, let's compare Gen-3 and Gen-4. First prompt. A static camera captures a child pressing his hand on a fogged window as flashing lights pass outside in the rain. Moody live action. Here's the result. The child on the left is static, simply watching the cars without moving. While the reflections through the glass work well, the proportions of the cars aren't always accurate. But overall, it's convincing. With the new generation of Runway, Gen-4, the child on the right shows emotion. Not only is he more dynamic, pulling his hand away from the glass, but he also displays a subtle backward motion and a highly realistic sense of shyness. The realism of the window and the lens flare effect from the car headlights is simply stunning. Just as impressive is the natural way the raindrops slide down the window. A locked camera watches an old knight slowly drop his sword in a quiet field filled with slow-motion fireflies. Poetic medieval tone. On the left, with Gen-3, nothing happens. Everything is static until suddenly sparks fall from nowhere. That's not at all what I asked for in my prompt. On the right, Gen-4 created a beautiful harmony with the fireflies' movement. The atmosphere feels magical. It's just a pity the night doesn't move at all. A slow dolly-in reveals a robot holding a flower while explosions light the burning city in the background. Cinematic post-apocalypse. The explosion behind the robot is extremely well done. Gen-3 handles the physics of explosions impressively. However, the robot itself is lifeless, completely static, which is a shame. The dolly-in I requested in the prompt wasn't respected at all. In Gen-4, the explosion's motion is even more impressive. The dolly-in works a bit better, though the movement here feels more horizontal. What's remarkable is that Gen-4 took the initiative to animate the robot, creating an unexpected interaction with the flower. The robot starts to smell it. This sequence tells a much deeper story. The impossibility for a robot to perceive the scent of a flower in an apocalyptic world, and the contrast between the gentleness of his gesture and the massive explosion behind him. Gen-4 constructed this beautifully. A slow zoom in on a lone wolf standing still on a snowy cliff as wind blows snowflakes past. Dramatic natural scene. Gen-3 introduces snowfall, which is fairly well done. The wolf moves its head slightly at the beginning, but then remains static. The zoom-in worked. There's a bit of wind affecting the tail, which adds some realism, but it's too subtle. Gen-4 doesn't just go for a straight zoom-in. It moves around the wolf's hill. Look at how realistic the perspective layers are. The way the background shifts in relation to the hill and the camera movement is spot on. The camera gradually reveals what the wolf is looking at. Fortunately, the wolf moves at the end of the sequence. I found it too static in the opening seconds. A handheld camera runs behind two silhouettes sprinting through a neon-lit alley chased by shadowy figures. Gritty Cyberpunk. In Gen-3, the characters run in a strange way. Sometimes the same leg is duplicated. The color remains consistent throughout the run. One success, though, is that Gen-3 managed to generate shadows chasing the runners on the left wall. And it works. As for Gen-4, there are still a few glitches during the run, but overall it performs well. Especially considering the number of steps is much higher than in Gen-3, which cheated by using slow motion. The hair movement of the character on the left is very well executed. Since Gen-4 wasn't able to generate shadows chasing them, it flipped my prompt and placed the shadows in front of the runners, which isn't what I wanted. An underwater tracking shot follows a woman screaming silently, her hair drifting like ink. Surreal, dreamlike atmosphere. Gen 3 amplified the emotion on the face, and it works. The water physics are decent, though not perfect. The hair movement underwater isn't very appealing. It took my ink-like comparison too literally. The water bubbles break apart in a strange way. Gen 4, on the other hand, delivered an outstanding result. The hair movement underwater is stunning, incredibly realistic. The water physics are spot on, and the light reflections from the water's surface are beautifully rendered. The young woman's expression of pain is chilling. She slightly opens her eyes at the end. It's hyper-realistic. A side-tracking camera follows a masked figure walking through falling cherry blossoms. Stylized slow motion. Instead of a side-tracking shot, Gen 3 pulls the camera backward as the masked character moves forward. The slow motion works well. The flower petals float in the air but move in a strange way. In Gen 4, the side tracking is correctly followed. However, conveying the character's walking motion remains a challenge. The flower petals fall way too quickly, even though their trajectory and rotation are more believable than in Gen 3. There's a loss of focus toward the end. It's a shame the tree becomes sharper than the ninja. A smooth crane shot rises as a woman levitates above a calm lake at dawn. Serene and ethereal. Don't forget to subscribe to support my work. As you can see, the woman's levitation in Gen 3 is straight and linear. It works, but feels too monolithic. Her shadow becomes increasingly strange in the water's reflection, morphing into a sinister clawed creature. The water surface itself is nicely rendered with gentle ripples. In Gen 4, the movement of the water surface is even better. As the camera moves toward the levitating woman, neither her body nor her shadow loses proportion. Her reflection in the water is perfectly mirrored. Even the subtle movements of her dress are accurately reproduced. A side-angle dolly shot captures a painter finishing a stroke as the canvas bursts into slow flames. Dramatic, artistic style. The fire is already very impressive in Gen 3. It followed the prompt well, with flames rendered in slow motion. As the painter paints, though, his brush begins to deform in strange ways. His wrist movement is realistic, but there are some flaws in his hand at times. Gen 4 didn't follow my instruction to slow down the flames. However, the fire physics are exceptional. The energy and movement of the flames are stunning. Unfortunately, the painter's brush doesn't work properly here. It spits fire like a flamethrower. A wide panning shot reveals a giant eye opening in the sky while people freeze mid-step below. Surreal and unsettling. Gen 3 failed the animation. The image is completely static until some passers-by suddenly walk across the frame. It doesn't work at all. Gen 4, on the other hand, understood all the elements to interpret in the scene. The passers-by move, the camera is dynamic, and the giant eye suddenly closes, then reopens at the end. It's excellent. A handheld camera watches a woman strike a match in the dark, revealing glowing ancient symbols on a cave wall. Mystical cinematic. In Gen 3, the Egyptian woman's gaze is accurate, as she's reading the hieroglyphs. Smoke rises from her match, but in a way that doesn't make much sense. On the hieroglyph-covered wall, a second flame appears where there should have been just a light reflection. That's a fail. There are also some optical distortions toward the end. Gen 4 did an excellent job with the woman's gaze, but it would have been better if she were reading the hieroglyphs rather than staring at the match. She also ends up suddenly holding 2 matches, which I didn't ask for. However, the smoke is nicely done. Watch how the light reflection on the wall follows the flame's movement perfectly. That part is very well executed. A top-down drone tracks a man walking on a frozen lake as cracks form beneath him. Tense, atmospheric shot. The way Gen 3 makes the character move is odd. He slides across the ice as he walks, which isn't very realistic. The ice doesn't crack as I requested in the prompt. At this point, Gen 4 doesn't do much better in terms of the ice. It still doesn't crack. However, the character's walk is much more realistic. He no longer slides. A few steps are duplicated and sped up, but overall, it works. A rotating camera circles a dancer spinning alone under a spotlight in a dusty, abandoned theater. Dramatic stage lighting. In Gen 3, the camera does a nice horizontal pan. However, the subject has a few issues. Her dress spins frenetically, and there are some anatomical problems with her arms and legs at the beginning. The beam of light is slightly distorted. Gen 4 brings much more movement to the dancer, making her leap several times, but the anatomical issues with the arms and legs are still present. The light beam with dust particles is perfect, though. Watch how realistic the shadow becomes when the dancer's arm passes through the beam. Beautifully done. And last one. A slow-moving orbital camera floats around a man suspended in zero gravity while debris spins slowly around him. Cinematic space scene. In Gen 3, the character is completely still, like a statue, until the very last second when he finally moves a little. The shadow passing over him covers his body well. That part works. The debris rotates slightly, but the effect could be enhanced to feel more dynamic. In Gen 4, every layer of debris is in motion. The spatial arrangement of the objects and their interactions work incredibly well. It's a breakthrough for AI-generated video animation. The character is no longer frozen like in Gen 3. This time, he moves and observes himself within this weightless environment. Absolutely stunning. That's all for today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It really helps me share my work with more people. If you want to learn how to use Runway, check out my course on Gumroad. You'll learn how to use Runway step by step. You'll also get access to an 80-plus page PDF filled with prompts and different visual styles. It's the result of hundreds of hours of testing. Take advantage of it. Wishing you amazing creations. This was Tayzon.